Alright, when tackling the history of language study, we generally do this to appreciate the intellectual traditions that shape today's understanding of language, to gain insights into how language has been studied and analyzed across history, to identify strengths and limitations of earlier approaches to language study, but most importantly is to contextualize the rise of modern linguistics as a departure from past traditions. There are three main approaches, starting first with traditional grammar. It is actually traced back to at least 15th century before Christ, expanded during the classical era, and when we say the classical era, we're talking of a period of great intellectual, artistic, and scientific achievements by philosophers and grammarians such as Plato and Aristotle in Europe and Panini in India. The main aim of traditional grammar was to analyze grammatical structures of individual languages, and that is, of course, to identify rules and conventions governing their use. However, when talking of this systematization of grammar, it was actually fully realized in the 15th century AD with the first grammar books, that is, of Antonio de Nebrea, Grammatica de la Lingua Castellana, which was the first grammar of a modern European language, that is, Spanish. And the purpose was, of course, to do what? To prescribe correctness in language use. Before him, and in here we're referring to Antonio de Nebrea, grammars were mostly of Latin, all right? And so again, they were taking Latin as the model. So grammar books were based on Latin as the ideal model. And that is because Latin was considered a sacred language of the Roman Catholic Church. It was viewed as the ultimate authority in religion and morality, considered as a perfect language for expressing complex ideas, a symbol of cultural and intellectual superiority, and it was also essential for careers in law, medicine, and humanities. Traditional grammar is of a prescriptive nature, that is, applying Latin-based rules to other languages without considering their uniqueness, and so we can say that it was subjective and prescriptive in nature because why? They tried to impose rules rather than describe usage. The framework of Latin and Greek. And so again, we're saying that traditional grammar was actually based not only in Latin but also on Latin and ancient Greek, which provided again the what? The framework for analyzing other languages. All right? Now for language change in traditional grammar. Since we said that they did not care about describing usage but imposing rules, then obviously they what? They considered language change as a decay or a decline. And so for them, variations in this regard, they refer to what? They refer to differences, okay? And they were labeled as incorrect or even as bad grammar. Traditional grammarians tried to resist change. They established and enforced strict norms and standards to prevent deviation. All right? And so when talking of language change in traditional grammar, they recognize the importance of effective communication, valued norms and standards for maintaining order in language. However, the approach was what? It was so rigid in nature and very much inflexible. And so it actually failed to acknowledge diversity and variability in language use and the fact that language constantly evolves over time. What's left today? Well, today we have standardization for learning and communication, especially in education, where we actually use standard languages as the medium of instruction. Clear rules to settle disputes. For instance, we say it does, not it do, or the subject, verb, object, etc. Also, it promotes simplicity, precision, and clarity. All right? Moving now to philology. Philology is actually rooted in the late Middle Ages and Renaissance. And when we talk of these, we're talking of what? Of a period that was most known for a revival of learning, marked the transition from medieval to modern thoughts. The term actually comes from Greek philo, which means love, and logos, word, together the love of learning and literature. It emerged with European humanism, which is a movement that focused on or focuses on the study of ancient Greek and Roman works. All right, so again, it emerged with European humanism and the rediscovery of classical texts or old manuscripts. The early focus of philology was the study of ancient texts, that is, in Greek and Latin, for education and theology. It later expanded to modern languages, literature, and cultures in Europe. As for the nature of philology, it's actually concerned with the historical development of languages. So it examined how languages change across time, linked to three factors: history, culture, and society. When talking of history, we have the historical factor, including conquests, migrations, contact, etc. A good example of this is the Norman conquest in 1066, and which, as a result of, we have Latin words in English, like for instance, justitia, justice, or gubernor, govern. The social factor in here, where we have class-based usage, like French by aristocracy and Latin by clergy or elite. As for the cultural factor, we have what? We have literature, art, music, reflecting what? Social values. The areas of interest in philology are three. We have grammar, rhetoric, and poetics. Grammar, of course, studied structures and vocabulary of ancient texts. For rhetoric, it's the art of persuasion, understanding, composition, and audience. As for poetics, it has to do with the study of form and expression and covering meaning and language nuances. Regarding the methods used in philology, we have a focus on written forms, that is, manuscripts, historical documents, etc. Compare texts or versions to identify patterns and changes, and use analysis to do what? To reconstruct linguistic and cultural contexts, though they were never 100% sure whether this reconstruction is correct. Obviously, it contributed to etymology. Etymology is the study of the origins and development of words in a language. Why? Because it traced origins and evolution of words. For example, English words with Latin and Greek roots, revealing cultural historical contexts. Now, philology still informs historical linguistics, that is, language change over time. Lexicology, which has to do with word meanings, we said previously, tracing how lexemes evolved, and lexicography, which has to do with dictionary making. A good example of this can be found and seen in the New Oxford American Dictionary. Moving now to comparative linguistics. It actually developed in the late 18th, early 19th centuries. It was a breakaway from philology because it focused on language relationships and evolution. And when we say relationships, we're obviously talking about more than one language, that is, comparing. So, a growing curiosity in comprehending the relationships between different languages and their historical evolution. Let's take a look at how this actually started. So, it all started with Sir William Jones, not James, who is an American philosopher. Now, for Sir William Jones, he observed similarities between Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek. All right? Basically, he learned Sanskrit while working in India. All right? And by comparing its words and grammatical forms with Latin and Greek, he noticed similarities in roots and inflections. For example, mata in Sanskrit, mater in Greek, and mater in Latin, and they all refer to the same meaning or English word mother. All right? This led to recognition that languages can be genetically related. As for the focus and objectives of comparative linguistics, first, it was always to reconstruct proto-languages. They refer to ancient parent languages from which a group of related languages descended. Alright, so tracing language change over time, and in here we can see the diachronic sense of studying languages. Classifying languages into families by identifying shared features, all right, to again explain the evolutionary patterns and relationships. So, obviously, analyzing the similarities and differences, because when we say comparing two languages, we're literally talking about what? We're literally referring to analyzing their similarities and differences to establish the genetic relationships between them. The achievement of comparative linguistics in the 18th and 19th centuries have had a profound impact on contemporary linguistics, providing a crucial foundation for our understanding of the first origins and second evolution of language. As for their methods and tools, they basically examined grammar, phonetics, and vocabulary across languages. And again, they use the comparative method, that is, first identifying cognates, which are words from common ancestry, reconstructing proto-languages, and third, tracing systematic sound and meaning correspondences. The 18th to the 19th century's achievements laid the foundation of modern historical linguistics. Why? Because they basically introduced systematic methods to comparing languages, and they provided insights into the origins, the change, and the classification of languages. We stated earlier that comparative linguistics has to do with what? With the diachronic way of studying language. And so in the 20th century, there was a shift again from the diachronic or historical stance to the synchronic structural present day analysis. So the modern focus now is on typological comparison, linguistic typology, that is the structural correspondences of what? Of living languages, with of course the search for universal characteristics of human language. So again, before the emergence of modern linguistics, we stated that comparative linguistics dominated the field and that the focus was purely historical, tackling what? The shared origins of languages. The new focus now is on the communicative aspect of language. So again, they moved from studying change diachronically to studying structure and use synchronically. And obviously, when we speak about modern linguistics, we're literally always referring to Ferdinand de Saussure, All right? The Swiss linguist, who is considered the founder or the father of modern linguistics, he proposed analyzing language synchronically, which means the present system of relationships, and he rejected the diachronic only focus since languages are always evolving. All right, this is so important here. All right, so we moved from the prescriptive approach with traditional grammar to the descriptive approach, which means that the emphasis now is on describing structure and use systematically and objectively, avoiding again the prescriptive judgments of what of correct and incorrect, which were found in traditional grammar. Okay? Good. Now for the outcomes. Language study became what? Systematic and scientific. They have finally established linguistics as an interdisciplinary research field, and the main focus now is on language structure and use as a core or as the core of communication. So again, this will lead us directly to what is called or to structuralism, which means they were literally looking at the language as a system made of subsystems, that is phonology, morphology, syntax. Okay? De Saussure again noted social aspect, that is parole. However, the focus stayed on what? On langue. We can see the impact of this shift in the phonemic and phonological structuralism, in the distributional linguistics, in Bloomfield's ICA, in Chomsky's generativism, etc. However, though, they've regarded language as a social, self-sufficient system of sound vocabulary grammar, which are analyzed separately. So for structuralism, it was insufficient, too formalistic, too rigid. Why? Because it simply ignored social and cultural aspects. And as a result of that, in the mid of the 20th century, the shift was to external influences on communication. So they started taking into account external factors and how they affect language use. That is literally taking us to what is called what? Variationist sociolinguistics, with what? With or with whom? With William Labov. According to him, language use is socially structured, tied to social norms. Also, not to forget Himes versus Chomsky and the introduction of communicative competence, which is literally the sum of the linguistic, pragmatic, and sociolinguistic competencies, all reinforced by a strategic competence. Again, there were new approaches, okay, namely functional linguistics with Halliday, interactional linguistics, conversational analysis, etc. And as a result, we said that the rise of sociolinguistics and pragmatics, all right, analyzing language use via social, cultural, psychological, and cognitive factors, as you can see here, as if this modern linguistics and the rise of variationist sociolinguistics opened the door for many other concepts to be integrated, leading to the interdisciplinary nature of studying and analyzing language. And so linguistics was finally recognized as interdisciplinary. Why? Because now we have links to sociology, anthropology, psychology, criminology, law, computer science, genetics, okay, neurology, etc. The aim was to solve real-world language problems in education, media, society. And so it was literally to provide non-linguistic explanations for phenomena such as code switching, language loss and memory, language acquisition, and different, I would say, phenomena that has to do with language from different perspectives or different angles, or I can even say from different disciplines. And that led to the emergence of applied linguistics in the mid 20th century to the present time. All right? So, again, to sum up, we have traditional grammar, prescriptive, Latin, and Greek as frameworks. The focus was correctness and standardization. And then the philology of language, the study of texts and and historical development, language, culture, history intertwined. We said that they focused on grammar, rhetoric, poetics, etymology. All right? Comparative linguistics, we said language families, genetic relationships, we said the reconstruction of proto-languages, and we said comparative methods to historical linguistics, or comparative methods that informed historical linguistics. And then we have modern linguistics with de Saussure again, structuralism, all right, phonology, morphology, syntax, as what as subsystems. We have the descriptive nature. If we look in here, so we have here descriptive and here what? Prescriptive. You see the shifting from this to this, all right? And the shift to language use, that is sociolinguistics, pragmatics, etc. And finally, we have applied linguistics, interdisciplinary, so we have different disciplines like psychology, sociology, law, etc., solving real-world problems in education, acquisition, media, and even more. Thank you so much for your attention. See you in the next video.